Okay, this is probably not your favorite paradigm by now, and I'm sure it still won't be by the time we get done with this section, but it's time for structured text. And if you remember in 5000, we had a nice toolbar and we got to see all the instructions that we could use in our structured text, and we could just click on those and they would pop up inside of our text editor, and then we could hover over it and we could get help menus and all that. Well, we still have help menus, but whenever we come over here and pull up our toolbox, guess what? Things are pretty empty. We have our case statements, we have our for statements, our loops, we have our if then else. We recognize some of this. Repeat and while, you can tell from the icons those are different kind of loops. And if I wanted to set up a while loop, I can click on that and drag that over here, and this is really nice. It actually lays that whole thing out for us. We don't have to try to, guess on the syntax or capitalization or anything like that. It just straight up tells us where to put our instructions, what to put where. I mean, let's face it, that is pretty handy. But whenever we're in structured text, obviously we're going to want to do more than just these things. So, where are the tools at? And when you come over here and, you look around, it doesn't show them. Well, they're there, but it's not going to show them to us in here. So we would have to go back out into something like a function block diagram routine and see what all controls are available there under our instruction blocks. Then we can come back in here, type them out, recreate them, or pull up help menus and things like that and see what they are. So I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to add a new function block diagram that popped up on mine as program 4. And I'm going to come in here, go into the toolbox, and pull up an instruction block. And what kind of thing would I like to use? Let's say, you remember that scalar? I kind of like that guy, so let's pull up the scalar. And if I create a scalar in here, now I can go into the help menu and I can look and I can see what this thing's got on it. And I can see examples in function block, and if I scroll down far enough, I can see how to set one of these up in structured text. And what's really good is it actually gives you an example right here that shows you how to set the thing up. Now, what would be even more useful is if you could copy this and paste it into your program, but unfortunately they've decided that that would just be a little bit too easy and they don't want you to do that. So you would have to manually type all of that out, but it's there. So there is a way to see what all is available to you. Basically, if you come into a function block diagram, create your instruction block, double click on that, here is your menu of everything that's pretty much available to you in structured text. It's not a guarantee that every single one of these things is going to be in there. Obviously for, like arithmetic operations, comparators, we're just going to use the actual operator. We're just going to use a greater than sign or an equals sign. We're not going to actually need to set up, an instruction, an object, a block to do that. But, for anything like scaling, timers, things like that, that's where we can find them. We can find them all in here. Then we can pull them up. We can search them out in the help menu, or if we just, create one on the screen here, then we can use our F1 or function F1 shortcut to get to it. But that's what you have to do to set something up. So let's go back into our program, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete this because I don't want it in my program anymore. So that new function block diagram program that I created is gone, and I want to set up a scalar. So how would I do that? Well, I'm going to go ahead and show you that one because it is a little bit larger, and you're going to need that to set up your own program, and you're going to need a few other things, but I'm going to let you figure those out on your own. But how do I set up a scalar? Well, the first thing I have to do is I need to create the object. So let's just go ahead and call it scalar1. That's good enough. And then I'm going to right click on that and go into my variable selector. And the name's already there, but I don't want a bool. In this case, I want the scalar object. So let me come down here in this list and see if I can find it. And I'm not seeing it, so let me just type it out. There we go. Got it. So now I actually have scalar1 created in my tag database or in my variable database now. And now this thing exists and I can work with it. So now that I've got the actual variable and the object exists, how do I instantiate it? Well, let me go ahead and start with an open parenthesis right after the name. And as soon as I do, look at that. It shows me all the parameters that I have to set for this scalar. So I go ahead and I set all of those in my first line, and that makes it actually pretty simple. I don't have to write 10 different lines of code to create one scalar. So let's start off with a real input, and that's going to be my level, comma, and then I need a real input min. Well, I'll just go ahead and use 0.0, and then input max. I'll say 16383.0. Then we've got our output min of 0.0. Output max is going to be 100.0. And that's it. So whenever I close this out, I've got everything configured. And I can just terminate that with a semicolon, and now my scalar exists. And the only thing that I have to do then is set up my actual output. So I've got the level, and I'll go ahead and go into the variable selector and set that up as my real. Got it? And let me just hover over that and make sure that actually worked. Well, it's not showing me anything, so let me go back into variable selector and okay, it's in there. Good. Now, where does my result go on my scalar? Well, let's say I have something and I'll call it level_sv for scaled value. I can use :enter to assign that a value, and that's going to be scalar1, which is the name I gave my scalar, dot, and right here I have my output. So I can just go ahead and select output and hit semicolon. And just like that, if I had a raw input signal coming in being called level, I could now send that to my level SV, and that would scale it from a 0 to 16383 scale to a 0 to 100 scale. And just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and build right now to double check that logic and make sure that it's clean. And sure enough, it says I've got an undeclared identifier. So what did I forget to declare? I maybe didn't set my level SV, did I? So let's go into selector, and sure enough, it thinks that's a bool. Let's go ahead and type out real, hit OK. And at that point, I think I've got it. So if I build this guy, I think it'll stick and I won't have an error. There we go. 1 succeed, 0 errors. So that is your taste of structured text programming in CCW. Now that you've seen how to set up one object, you should know how to set up pretty much any object. And everything else in here is going to be basically just like 5000. You're going to have conditions, if, else, and don't forget, when you come over here to the toolbox, if you need an if statement, just come down here to the next line, and you can just drag that right over there and let it go. And you've got else, you've got else if, which is, something that we worked with before. You've got end if, and if you don't need these, maybe you just need if. That's okay. You can just boop, get those right out of there. And then you can come here and you just, replace this with what you actually need. So it's going to do some of the heavy lifting for you, but when it comes to finding any kind of advanced functions that you might want to use, you're going to have to probably go into a function block diagram routine and create an instruction block and double click on it and see what your options are. So at that, I will leave you to do your project, set up your level and scaling. I already showed you that piece. And don't worry, I won't make you watch it again in the next one. I'll go ahead and leave that in here and I'll build on it whenever we come back. But as far as everything else, setting up your alarm and notification bits, you should be able to now do that hands-on and build it and see if it builds. We won't know if it works, but we will at least know that you're laying down some structured text without any errors. And don't worry about seeing if it works, because in the next section, oh, trust me, we're going to get to build big, big, beautiful things and see if they work. So do your project and I'll do mine in the next.